the first inaugural episode of ChatGPT Plugin Pioneers. It is Friday. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And we have a group of people today. So we have two individuals showcasing their plugins. We have a lot of questions from the audience or from Twitter. And hopefully, we also have questions coming in from yourself. So as you join in, you'll see the chat over here on the right. So hopefully, I can see what you're saying. If not, message me on the OpenAI forums because I have that open. So I can see when there's like a +1 or something like that. But if for any reason anything's going on there. So to walk you kind of through what we're going to do in the next hour, it's going to go quick. We are going to start with Ben Yu. He's going to talk about his company and his plugin, Create Code, and kind of dive into all the amazingness that is for teaching and learning how to start coding K through 12. And then we have Bruce D'Ambrosio, and he is going to be talking about his plugin that helps with searching, querying the internet, kind of finding different things across it, and challenges that went into that, along with maybe some of his background into AI and his experience in there. After that, we're going to open it up to questions. And so we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, which seems silly since this is the first time, so hopefully you do. But if you don't, we have, I think, about 8 or 9 that people sent. And so we will be addressing those. I hope that you want to join us. So it's my face right now, but it's going to be Ben's, it's going to be Bruce's as we're talking, and hopefully it can be yours too. So if you want to join us for the Q&A to help answer those questions that people are asking, just reach out. I will share a link actually in the chat and just join into, like, click on that link. And then when you do that, you'll show up on my left-hand side and I can bring you in as long as you want to join in. So that's for later on in the episode though. For now, we are going to dive right into showcasing some of the amazing work that's been going on. Again, the reason for this is I think we've all been developing plugins for a while, or at least using OpenAI's APIs for a while. And it's about bringing us together, kind of allowing our creativity to merge and blend as we talk about what hard work we've been doing. All right, so without further ado, let me bring in Ben Yu. Ben, welcome.
Hello. Hi, thank
Ben,
you.
Yeah, Ben, just a little bit of background on him. CS PhD, worked at UIUC, worked at Morgan Stanley, executive director, automated trading. So you know a lot about like the need for AI, and then kind of pivoted into the createacode.com, which is your flagship product. And I'm sure you're going to talk about it, but if you haven't, go check it out, everybody. We can put a link in the chat. Essentially, it's serving K through 12 schools to help teach coding, which is really cool. Kind of takes Scratch beyond. But that's enough of me. Ben, tell us a little bit about your background. What got you into all this?
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I know we don't have a lot of time. I'll just be really quick. I always believed, coding is fun. Everybody should play with it, learn about it in school, even though they may not be a programmer. So that's why I have always interested in coding and teaching, and that's why I founded this company. Like you said, right, we're trying to make sure more kids can learn with simple syntax, but can create fun and cool stuff. So that's why we created Create Code. And that also comes to why we created this plugin, because the number one problem in coding education is really a lot of teachers don't really know about coding themselves. So the idea is hopefully with the AI like ChatGPT, we can make them become more helpful for teachers, for students. And this plugin is the first step.
And Ben, when I was playing around with your plugin, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is kind of like an enhancement to Scratch. Is that correct? Or like talk a little bit about that, just so like that's how I kind of saw it, as like this massive enhancement to Scratch, making it a lot better.
Yeah. So yeah, Scratch is like every kid when they're in school, elementary school, they start by learning Scratch. So it's an awesome language, but it's deliberately kept very simple, and there are only limited things it can do. So what we are trying to do is to enhance it so that kids can start to build, can keep playing with it as they grow bigger, like middle school or even high school. For example, you can build AI applications or build 3D games, all using the same kind of block-based language that they are already familiar with. And so they don't have to struggle with the language syntax anymore. Especially with AI today, right? You can easily translate from any language to another language, right? So the language is not really the
Yeah,
point. We shouldn't spend a lot of time on learning how to do a for loop in 5 languages, right? We should really be, I mean, we hope they can use one language that's simple, but learn to solve problems with it.
absolutely. Uh, I want to ask more, but let's jump into the demo so that we can see what we're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Do
All
you
right.
have that ready? And if not, I do.
Now I have, let me share my screen.
Cool.
All right. Can you see my screen?
We should have it now. Looks a little blurry though.
Well, maybe give it a minute.
Okay.
So maybe you or me can post this link to the our stream. Maybe
Sure
that's
thing.
easier. Because I thought about it. I feel like probably I should just show you some examples. This is much faster than running the plugin. Everybody feel free to try them yourself. But basically, this is what it does. So you can write a simple prompt, like draw a star with pen, and then it will go out and it will create a pseudocode. That's ChatGPT already knows, right? But then it will need help from our plugin to translate it into a nice image, because that's what the students are used to. And then there are more examples, like create colorful rows with ovals. You know, the program can be fairly complex if you ask ChatGPT to do it. And then you can write 3D programs. So that is one of the extensions we added to Scratch. So ChatGPT doesn't really know that Scratch can write 3D code, right? So we have to teach it in our instruction, like how to use the blocks, like how to create programs with them. And then there are other examples, like this one is a chat application that's using ChatGPT. So this is created by ChatGPT using our plugin. If you put in this prompt, so the idea is you create a chat window, and then you can start to have a conversation with it. There are a lot of comments, so this is really simple. It's like 7, 8 blocks that you can already create a pretty nice chat application. So I'm just gonna stop here, I guess. Everybody feel free to try it and let us know your feedback, please.
One question I had been is, as I was looking at this, I'm getting lag there. Is it possible for you to click on the image and it take you into like a sandbox?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're working on.
Cool.
So we're gonna post a link, and you can click on it. Then it will open up our playground, which looks like this. So, and then you can run the program that's generated automatically. You can change it, tinker with it, whatever you want to do.
Awesome. Yeah, I could see that being a very useful step as you ask it to create the program, and then you get to go play with it more.
Yeah,
decompose it and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we have a question about challenges. Like I also just want to know your opinion on as OpenAI has kind of lowered the barrier for entry of coding, and you are lowering the barrier of entry to coding, or like to understand it. You see those kind of working together to really have like a 5-year-old building their own program, understanding a 6-year-old, and just like age doesn't matter.
Well, I think it still matters because coding
Sure,
is a
sure.
fairly complex process. Even today, ChatGPT cannot do it really well on a
Hmm.
lot of tasks. So I think, yeah, we're going in the same direction, but I think probably in the future, elementary school kids can do a lot of things that today it takes an adult. That's definitely possible.
Yeah,
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 that's
that's
amazing.
amazing.
So in
So
this,
in this,
again, we
again,
all
we
have
all
been
have
kind of
been kind of
building
building
plugins
plugins
like in our
like in our
silos.
silos.
What were some
What
of
were
the
some of the
challenges that
challenges
you
that
ran
you ran
into
into
that I'm
Yeah.
that I'm
sure I
sure
ran
I
into
ran
that
into
that
and
Bruce ran
Bruce ran
into that
into
like
that like
what
what
what was
what was
there is
there
echo.
is echo.
Yeah.
One
One
second.
second.
If you
Hello.
can talk
You can
about
talk
your
about your
challenges, and I'm going
challenges,
to
and
try
I'm
to
going to
fix
try
this
to fix this
echo.
echo.
Sure, sure. So yeah, I prepared a few bullet points for this. So the first one is unpredictable behavior. So my feeling of from using the plugin enabled ChatGPT is that it feels like a 3.7 version, which means it's an improvement over 3.5, but not as smart as 4.0. What I mean is when I give it complex instructions, you can understand it better than 3.5, but it still sometimes go off the tangent and doesn't do what I intended to do. For example, what in our plugin, we need to essentially teach it a new language, a new syntax. But ChatGPT sometimes believes it knows the syntax, so it will just go out and start to write code without, following our instructions. So that is definitely the challenge, one of the big challenges. And then the next one is currently it is kind of slow, especially when it is composing the prompt, like writing the code that is to be translated to images. So that is has always been a challenge. So at the beginning, what we tried to spend a lot of time on to improve is to reduce the number of API calls. But it turns out that isn't really the bottleneck, because sending a request and then coming back is not doesn't take a lot of time. So the challenge is really about reducing the amount of data that ChatGPT has to generate to compose the prompt that is sent to the plugin. So that is something we have spent a lot of time trying to optimize. And also, it's like I said here, it's okay to you should try to avoid repeated calls, which means in your instruction, you should tell it, if you already know this, don't try to ask me again. So that can also help save a lot of time and tokens. And then the next one is about some strange caching issue. I don't know if other people have seen it, but sometimes our plugin get a request from ChatGPT that is seems to be using an older version of our API. So that just be aware that might happen. And then the next one is the character limit, right? You all know there's a 8,000 letter limit on the model description, and we have spent a lot of time on that as well, like trying to squeeze in the best instructions. That's definitely one of the most complex prompt you would ever write. And you try to give a very precise instruction to ChatGPT within that word limit. Uh, you know, and sometimes just doesn't feel like enough, because you would always start to find new issues and then you try to clarify it. You start to add more examples in your description. And then sometimes you see side effects, and that's part of the problem of ChatGPT not being smart enough. So you may give it an example which help resolve one issue, but then the ChatGPT may learn something else from your example because the
Yeah,
prompt is so large, and then you start to see other problems popping up. So that is always a challenge. And then lastly, so since our plugin has been published already, we have noticed some difference between the unverified version and the verified version. Meaning, so when we try to run it as unverified, we always get good results. But once we publish the same code to production, then it starts to do something very different. So I'm not sure if others have noticed the similar problems, but so be aware, right? When you publish your plugins, you may need to do more testing for the production system because it may not do the same as your dev system. So I'm just gonna stop here for the challenges.
Let me
Let me
test to
test to
see.
see.
Mm, I'll have
I'll
it.
have it.
Still
Still
echoing,
echoing.
Bruce?
Yeah.
Okay, give me
Okay, give me
one
one
second.
second.
Let me just turn this off. One question
One
that I
question
did
that I
have
did
for you
have for
while
you while
we're
we're
fixing this
fixing this
echoing.
echoing.
There
There
is in the
rules and the
policy or the policies is
policies is
asking for
asking
us
for us
to not
to not
drive the
drive the
model,
model,
to not
to
try to
not try to
influence it.
influence it.
What's your
What's your
opinion on that
opinion
when
on
you're
that when
talking
you're talking
about
about
the issues
the
you're kind
issues
of
you're kind of
having?
having?
I think, well, that's a really a vague this rule, right? It's not exactly clear what it means. So our approach to it is, I mean, our goal is the same, right? We're trying to solve the problem for the user. So long as we're helping ChatGPT to help us answer the user's question, then we're going the same way. I don't think OpenAI would have any problem with that.
I think
I think we
Expedia
Expedia
doing
doing
the same
the thing.
Wait, you're breaking out a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, are we
Okay,
now?
are we now?
Yep.
We're
Still
echoing.
echoing.
Okay.
Okay.
Gonna have to
Gonna
just
have to
roll
just
with it.
roll with it.
Let me try
Let
to
me try
jump
to
out and
jump
jump
out and
back
jump
in,
back
and I'll
in,
be
and I'll be
right back.
right back.
Bruce, I'm
Bruce, I'm
going
going
to
to
bring
bring
you
you
in,
in,
and
and
y'all can
y'all can
just
just
talk
talk
for
for
1 minute.
1 minute.
I
I
will
will
be
be
right
right
back.
back.
Bruce will also be giving a showcasing his plugin. Oh wait, it's gone. It's when we are sharing the screen. Okay, all right, cool. That's good to know. Sorry about that, everybody. I will try to see what's going on there, but it seems like it's gone now. Is that correct? It's no longer echoing. Okay, sorry to make that a focus when we were talking about some awesome stuff there, Ben. So yeah, the challenges. I'm interested to hear from the audience to see if those are the same challenges that you're running into, especially the if the schema was being like hashed or cached too long and wasn't being invalidated. Because I haven't run into that, but I read on the forums other people were having that problem as well, and so interested to see kind of what's going on there. But Ben, thanks for showcasing your plugin. Again, sorry about the audio. We'll get that figured out. But
No problem.
appreciate you showcasing that. And I'm going to bounce you out. Bruce, I'm going to bounce you in. And then we'll kind of look at some of the questions after that. So thanks again, Ben.
You got it.
Welcome, Bruce.
Good day.
Maybe we will try to not share screens. I don't know. We'll see. But let's try, and then I'll just be quiet the whole time. All right. So, Bruce, you are the founder of Tuyi, and you have a really kind of elaborate, awesome background in AI. You got your PhD from UC Berkeley, and so there's a whole history, I'm sure, that you understand, kind of leading up to this moment of kind of OpenAI announcing their AI that now everyone kind of says like AI is here, right? And so first, I'd love to kind of dive into your background a little bit, and then we'll jump into the plugin that you've been working on. So can you tell the audience here who you are, what your background is, how'd you get interested into AI, all that fun stuff?
Sure. I've been interested in mind ever since I can remember. 8 or 9 years old. And so I fell into computer science and eventually said, hey, that looks interesting, and went to do a PhD at Berkeley. And there were some interesting people there around a whole cognitive science community. They brought a whole bunch of people together from different departments about, what is AI and what is mind. And by the way, personal opinion, we're not there yet. I mean, it depends. There's so many definitions. But one of the when I saw, so I did a PhD. I was a professor for a while. That got boring, so I jumped into startups when product recommendation was a big deal in the early 2000s. Did that for a while, moved on, did something else. But when ChatGPT started getting all the buzz, my ears perked up, and I said, "Oh, maybe there's something going on here that's interesting." And so I couldn't help myself. I dived back in, started playing with it. But there's a lot of pieces missing, and I think, personal opinion, I think people, it's super useful, but it is not a mind yet. And I very quickly saw some things. It became indispensable to me, but there were things missing. So I'm a tool builder. So I started building tools for myself. And that's sort of where we are today. I'm not hearing you.
This is the last time we're going to deal with this. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I think a lot of us were on that trajectory of we were doing something, and then November hit, and we just stopped, right? And we pivoted. I had quit my job in November to start my company and was going in a completely different direction. I was going to build Shopify plugins because I'm good with like small businesses and blah 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 blah. And then November happened and I just stopped and pivoted. And it sounds like something similar with yourself. It's like most of us saw the potential that was there, what was missing. And we said, like, we got to get involved. Got to start playing. And it's funny because if you look back into like 2020, 2021, there was people that saw it even before us, right? Because those APIs were there. They were playing around. Now plugins weren't there, but this has been something that some people have been playing with for a long time. But yeah, it definitely, I think ChatGPT caught us all, which is cool. All right. So let's dive into your plugin. So you said you're a builder. What'd you build? What do you like building that you thought could make ChatGPT better?
Well, sure. So I started realizing that ChatGPT basically, for me, became a replacement for Google, except that, it only was updated up to 2021. So I started looking about what I could do about that because I'm a developer and I got itchy fingers. And this plugin came out of that. And so you quickly run into, when you try to sort of add web search, you realize there's a whole bunch of problems with building that into ChatGPT in an effective way. And I got to the point where I realized that, this may be useful to other people too. So I open sourced it. It's on GitHub. But there will probably be other versions besides the open source one. Basically it's a web search that works as a plugin to ChatGPT, that also works as just an HTTPS endpoint for API calls. So if you're building an app using the API that also needs web access, there you go. Here it is. It's free, open source online. That was my motivation. Another big part of the motivation, one more piece there was, I get very impatient, and there's an awful lot of garbage out there on the web. So I added curation. It has whitelist, blacklist, unlisted, and it won't go near the blacklist. It looks at the whitelist first, just to sort of make it more useful. Bunch of
Gotcha.
other features like that.
And so is it searching only or is it scraping as well?
Well, I think the best thing I can do now is show you a little bit of a screen.
I That's a great segue. Go for it.
So
And
I can do. Do you see the screen? Can you verify that's working?
I can see the screen.
Okay, you're seeing
And
a chat window, right?
one second. It's blurry right now, but last time it took a little bit to kind of come in. And then of course my audio started. So we'll see here.
Okay, there you are. Yeah, I see. Okay.
Okay.
So the font is kind of small. I can enlarge it, but I wasn't really there. So here's a sample. I might ask ChatGPT. Tell me about Tesla full self-driving. And ChatGPT comes back with all its usual stuff, pretty much what you'd expect. It's important that as of September 21st, Tesla's full self-driving is not fully autonomous, blah, blah, blah. But this last paragraph is new. Please note the information here is based on Tesla's full self-driving as of September 2021. There may have been developments since then. If you would like to know about updates or changes, let me know and I'll perform a search for you. So I said, yes, please do. And here's what it came back with. It came back with widespread beta testing from Gizmodo, a price increase that happened from The Verge, a recall due to safety from CNN. And they're all, how can I say this? If you go out and actually look at a web page, you'll see that some of the pages you get back, even if you just extract the pure text without any of the other stuff, can be 100,000 characters long. What are you going to do with that? ChatGPT can't handle that. So one of the challenges here, there's a whole bunch of back end that does a lot of pre-processing on each page to reduce it down to a small enough chunk that it then sends to ChatGPT Turbo for final reduction, and finally gets a small enough chunk back to send to ChatGPT for display.
I finally learned what OpenAI calls that, which is recursive decomposition, because I do the same thing for like reading a 150 page PDF. And how do you do that? Right. You can't.
Right.
And so this term is something that I think they coined in 2021. Well, that's what they're using for how can they summarize an entire book. A large body of text is recursive decomposition, which is what you're describing here.
Yeah, almost. It is very similar, but a lot of it is not using ChatGPT because I'm cheap. I can't afford it. So I do a lot of pre-processing on the page to get each page down to about 4,000 or 5,000 characters before I even send it to ChatGPT for its initial, well, not ChatGPT, to GPT 3.5 Turbo for its final reduction of that page entry. It also sends back, of course, the URLs so that you've got the links back to the original pages, things like that. The other thing that it does is it does image search. So the next example I've got here is I'm writing an article about Rome. Please show me 3 pictures that might work as illustrations for the article. Now it actually finds 10. But I specifically said 3 because it takes too long for it to display 3. So, it sends back 3 pictures, again, with the links of the original.
Bruce,
and of course, it warns you down at the bottom, you may need to obtain permission. I can then say, now this we're going to do live, so we'll see if it works. Show me the next 3. So it integrates pretty well with and that's mostly ChatGPT. That's not me, but I'm always surprised at how well ChatGPT can interpret these responses, keep them around, flexibly use them.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly handy tool for me at this point.
Can I ask you, with your search, how are you forming the query that then goes to whatever search engine you're using? So you say, show me
Great.
3 images that might be relevant for blah, 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 right? That then has to go to some search API. So how are you forming that query?
That's an excellent point. ChatGPT does some on its own. It tends to
Mhm.
not send super long queries, but it will often do things like send too complex a query. So
Yep.
one of the
Yep.
things I do is I just send the original query back to ChatGPT, back to GPT 3.5 and say, hey, reformulate this query. Give me a nice, concise query that'll work well for Google. And I also extract key keywords. I do that a lot on my own, but also with help from GPT 3.5. I rank them using WordFreak to find out how unique those keywords are. I add one or two of those to the query to make yet a third query. So it actually does 3 GPT Google queries in parallel to get 20 or 30 web pages back. And then it launches all those page retrievals in parallel to start getting the pages back and digesting them.
Have you seen when you ask for it to build the Google query that it actually builds better queries than like I started learning how to build better Google queries by seeing what it was using, like the ORs and like, like only do.org.gov for like verify it. Like it would come back with a query and I'd look and I'd be like, I never Google like that ever. And I was like, okay, like I thought I was good at Googling. And then it comes back with this kind of query. And I'm like,
I bet that would happen. I tend to be pretty succinct in my typing because I'm not that fast. So yeah, the queries are usually better, especially if I'm talking about something to ChatGPT, and it decides in the context of that conversation that it needs to do a search rather than me specifically asking it to do a search. It'll do a pretty good job of pulling out the right query to send to the search.
Yeah. One little thing that I learned whenever I'm dealing with large bodies of text, because you were talking about that earlier, is if anybody is using Node, and I'm sure there's other libraries that do this, but there's something called stop words. And stop words are just common words, that we all use in context, but LLMs don't need them in order to understand the context of it. So you can take something that I think last night I was working with a transcript and it was 15,000 words and it got reduced down to 8,800 just by removing the stop words. So as we're all kind of like sharing tips and tricks, that's one of them, is like the library is actually just called stop words for Node. I'm not sure what it is in other languages, but check it out. And that can just immediately strip out unnecessariness and reduce your word count.
It's I'm gonna have to give that a shot.
It's nice. Awesome, Bruce. Very, very cool. Okay. We I think are coming to the end of our showcase. We did have one other person, but they had to drop last minute. So I'm going to bring Ben back on. Bruce, if you could stop sharing the screen. And we have the 3 of us. Awesome. I just want to thank both of you for reaching out. This kind of stuff, like nobody wants to just come and see my face and me talking. This is about, the developers. It's about all of us, but it's about you sharing your story. So I just want to thank you for coming on, and sharing, being the guinea pigs at the beginning of this. And anyone watching, DM me, like share more. Don't be afraid to jump on. There's nothing here it's a Friday. Like this is just relaxed. All of us kind of hanging out and talking. But very cool stuff, Ben, Bruce. Thank you again. We are going to jump into, we do have some Q&As, but we also have 2 questions that were posed to us that kind of that are less of asking for like specifics and more of opinions. So moving into kind of an opinion piece now. And we have 2 people in the waiting room. We have Keith and Jazz. Keith, I'm going to bring you and Jazz in because I'd like to open this up. And anyone else, there is a link here Let me make sure it's back in the chat. Join us. Come talk. Sit in here. it's just us. And so I'm gonna present these kind of opinion pieces. Just if you have something, like, talk about it. If you want to share your opinion on it, like, share. So Keith, welcome. If you want to turn on your video, feel free. If you don't, I understand. Would you like to say hello? Are you there? 3, 2, 1. Jazz, are you there? Jazz, here. Oh, really? Bruce, is it still hard to hear me?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, we got Keith and Jazz. Whenever you want to chime in, I think they're muted. They're not muted on my end. I'm seeing them as, but who knows? We're figuring it out together. All right. So first kind of opinion piece or opinion question is, right now, ChatGPT is text-based. This worked for the MVP, and it definitely caught the virality of that it needed to. But how do we see the evolution of the UI impacting plugin development? Right? Is the long term? Is our opinion that the long term solution is in text-based, maintaining ChatGPT, or will it evolve into something else, and will that impact plugin development? Again, no right or wrong answers. Just what's your opinion on this? Right? This is the first time we've seen a full product like this that is pure text based, like kind of going back to like the 80s and 90s. And do we see it continuing that into the future? Ben, thoughts?
Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think the idea is really about thought, right, or communication. Like when we talk to each other, words is still the dominant way of communicating meanings. So I think it will still stay the main channel or main media of communication, and then you add video or pictures or even programs, on top of that. So that's just how I see it would evolve.
Yeah. That was kind of my thinking as well. Is I think I read a article about how they were going to hold off and release everything with GPT-4, but basically Sam came and said, like, you got to get this out now. Like we need this out in front of people now. And I think that either began or really sparked the approach that a lot of us are familiar with, which is just get the MVP out and iterate, right? And so if it starts with text, it starts with text, right? And we as plugin developers will build for this environment, and then it'll evolve. And as it evolves, we'll be there to evolve with it, and to not pay too much attention to where is it going to be in 2 years. I mean, right now at this point, like, it could be different in a week from now. I feel like every morning I wake up and there's some change, some major difference. But if you're focused on that, then you're going to miss out on what's happening now. Is kind of how I took this when it was asked. But Bruce, what are you thinking? Goodbye, Bruce.
Yeah, well,
There you are.
I think about I think video would be amazing. Think, for example, of wanting ChatGPT to help you with something you're building, or with your engine. I'd love to be able to show ChatGPT what happens inside my engine and have it ask me questions. Well, is that thing shorted out over there? Go wiggle it. But I have a hard time imagining what that would mean in terms of the plugin API and how that would have to change. Presumably ChatGPT would do all the video interpretation for me and just send some kind of, I don't even know what, iconic video representation of what was there relevant to the question that it expected me to be able to answer. Hard to think of how the plugin side of a video interaction would work.
Yeah, yeah. I think also like I think you alluded to it, and one of my thoughts is just this chat box that we're kind of stuck in right now, right? And of course, the API allows for you to build whatever, but is this chat box going to eventually be deprecated and evolve into something else? And that, like you said, would have a dramatic impact on plugin development. But I think a lot of questions, or at least I'm being asked, is like, do we really think we're going to stay with a chat window? Do we really think we're going to stay with a chat, like a chat interface for the next 2 to 3 years? And I think that may be short-sighted in terms of like, it doesn't matter. Everything's changing so fastly. Be here now, be present now, be building now, and we'll figure it out together in like 3 months when the whole thing changes again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I agree. That's like do you wait for the better next model of the car, or do you just get what you can now and worry about it later? You gotta dive in now. You can't wait.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. Last kind of opinion piece before we jump into the Q&As is right now with the publication of plugins. It used to be, I think, like 8 that started off, and then 10 more were added. Ben, you know that. Congratulations on yours being published. If we haven't mentioned that, everyone, Create a Code is published and able to be and verified in there. So congratulations on that.
I think 10 more were added today.
They were. Yeah. The first video game made by a 10-year-old is on there, and that was cool. So picture this in like 6 months or a year from now. We have 100, we have 1,000 plugins. We have kind of this overwhelmingness of plugins. Right now, I think if you're a developer, you understand why they limit it to 3, because you understand what the processing that has to happen to pick which API to call and all of that, which plugin to use. So like we as developers know why they're limiting to only have 3 turned on. But how do we see this as developers scaling, changing to allow for a rich, vibrant plugin ecosystem? Because as it stands right now, it's hard to find them. If we were to have 1,000, their interface is hard, but also really from the enabling multiple plugins and using them in a fluid manner, do we see that changing? Any opinions there?
All right, I'll still go first.
Cool.
I guess we'll just ask ChatGPT, right? When there are 1,000 plugins, we'll just ask it to recommend some plugins. And then we'll use them. And then the other thing I guess we can do is to allow cascading calls to plugins, which means one plugin may be talking to another, right? It's all API calls. So it doesn't have to all come from the user directly.
Plugins currently talk to each other. Or rather, and let me see if I understand you correctly, ChatGPT can be the orchestrator of multiple calls to different plugins to get to one answer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So I think the limit may not be a limit if we allow for that. Because my plugin may say, oh, to answer your question, I may not even tell the user, right? I may be behind scene calling other APIs to do it.
It actually, what you said kind of leads me into wondering about like plugin packages. Like if we start thinking about plugins that work together really well, and then like packaging them into like, some kind of way that you can say like these 6 work really well together.
But I do see one problem is speed. Like currently it is already much slower than everybody likes. So if you may need to submit your question and then go out do something else before all the plugins work out the answer. So I mean, if you move on to GPT-4, it's gonna be even slower. So I'm not sure exactly how they are gonna deliver a good solution.
Yeah. there's challenges that I think we as developers can see, right? It's like, I wish I could be inside of those whiteboard rooms, because like, they're thinking about this stuff, right? And it's just like, as I'm thinking about solutions, I wonder what their solutions are. I wonder what the team of people sitting around, like, yeah. And I wish I had answers to that. Bruce, any thoughts on this?
I'm not sure this is directly connected, but with some of the things I've been experimenting with, I've realized that the conversation is when you talk about multiple plugins, especially, is very unidirectional. I mean, even when you have a user, ChatGPT, and a single plugin, well, imagine if you had three people in a conversation. Each one of them would be able to hear what everyone else is saying. But a plugin can't hear what the user's saying. It's only allowed to hear what ChatGPT wants it to hear. It would be much more interesting, especially in a multi-plugin environment, if everybody could hear everybody else in the conversation.
It just fired off communication events and everyone got them that were enabled. Yeah. Absolutely. We have RATC kind of chiming in over here. I'm going to throw a couple of the comments just up. Will the future be where you enable like 100 powerful, diverse plugins having this super AI? I think that's kind of what we're alluding to, is like, is that a potential future? And I don't see why not. It's not tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, but it's definitely gonna be hard to make sure your plugin works, because when you test it, you develop it, you are working by yourself, right? But you don't know really if you throw it in with another 100 plugins, like there can be an infinite number of combinations. So yeah, that's going to be a real challenge even for developing the plugin. So I guess in some sense, that's why they isolated the plugins, at least for now, to keep it simple.
Yeah. I think everyone is kind of coming up with a strategy for this. And at least in my work, it is create every single exposed API is its own isolated modular like component. It exists on its own and it needs nothing from any other outside source other than ChatGPT, but it can handle anything ChatGPT wants to throw at it. And so in that sense, there is no dependencies whenever ChatGPT comes to me. And so one suggestion I can give to anyone that is like building is try to build in a way that doesn't depend on additional calls. Like the more that you create those dependencies, the more fragile your system is going to be. And the more that you're going to have to hope ChatGPT follows instructions. And that is, you have to do that sometimes, but try to minimize those as much as possible. Yeah, that's one solution there, or one suggestion.
Or I guess another thing they can do from OpenAI is they can have these profiles, right? Maybe I'm just coding, so I'm just gonna click up one button, then I'm working with these three plugins. I know they work, right? And then if I'm starting
shopping
something else, right? Yeah, I've started to switch to a different profile. It'll be much easier to do the context switch because you don't really need 100 plugins to do everything, right?
Yep. And very rarely am I doing shopping and dev work at the same time. Yeah, that's a good point. Different personas. All right, let's see. One last one. Oh, you have a plugin. Awesome. Ping me the plugin. And if you'd like to share it next time, we're going to have this next event or the next event next week, Friday in London or London time. And so we had people kind of requesting for that. And so sign up. That'd be great. All right. With kind of the last 15 minutes or so, let's jump into, well, we have one more, and I want to honor the audience that's asking it. So here's one more question coming in. What do you think of this move to charge for API use? For example, Twitter and more recently Reddit started to charge. Are APIs going to be the gold data of the future? Good question. Bruce, you want to go first on this one? Or Jazz or Keith, if you're there and your mic is working, like chime on in. We'd love to hear from you. But if not, Bruce, you're up.
Okay. Yeah. I wish it was free.
Yeah, I know.
Everything was free. I suspect costs are going to drop dramatically. But, it's just, you get what you pay for, right? Would you rather pay for the everything by ads or by dollars out of your pocket? I subscribe to a bunch of online sources, including YouTube, because I do not like putting up with ads. If the content is valuable, I'll pay for it. If I think the value is worth the cost, people who can't afford to or don't want to, I wish they could put up with ads rather than be excluded. But people got to cover the costs, and right now it's pretty expensive.
And Bruce, what are your thoughts on, like, as we're seeing this change from, like, Reddit announced that they're going to start charging for their API because AI, people are starting to use it for LLMs and whatnot training. We definitely saw it with Twitter, Elon Musk kind of announcing that. And so as we're starting to, it really is this major shift from when even Microsoft, right? Microsoft said, hey, our searches, our APIs are now going to be 10x what they were. And so are we going to start to see these that become the standard? Whereas for the past 30 years, it was almost like exposing the API got people to use your platform, which then was good for the business. And so they gave it away for almost free, basically nothing. But now they're charging a lot for it. Do we see that kind of becoming the standard of charging for this API access?
Well, it depends on what you call a lot, right? I mean, my search engine, which is LLM search, by the way, on GitHub, if it's I pay for Google searches. They're pretty cheap, but Google search isn't free. Not the customized engine endpoint that I use. Stuff costs. Either it costs the PR department or it costs the customers.
Yep.
Or the investors. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah. Ben, any thoughts there?
Well, I agree with what you guys said. I don't have a strong opinion there. I think every business has their own way of surviving and making money. So if they believe that's the best way to monetize what they have, we'll see, right? Probably in a year or two, we'll see whether that's going to be the new trend.
Gotcha. All right. Jumping over into Marcelo's question, what do you think about a standard for plugins coming? Perhaps with MiniChat LLMs, probably some will allow more things than others. How the browsers at the time? One thing that I can bring up, Marcelo, I'm not sure I exactly understand, but in looking at a standard, at least for interacting with language models, if you haven't played around with LangChain, I recommend it to a point. It doesn't have really good execution task managers, but everything else about it is really good. And I think we will start to see this standardization of how to build for interacting with LLMs, build plugins, things like that. And also, like, these live events are about sharing how I built it, how Ben built it, how Bruce built it, so that we can start to figure out, like, what are those things that, like, got us over the hump that now can kind of become standardized. We're at, like, the beginning of all of this, right? And so we're figuring out together, and that's the exciting part, is like we get to be a part of how that's defined in the community, especially the open source community. But standards, I would check out LangChain if you're interested in kind of a standardization for interacting with large language models.
Yeah. In terms of plugins, though, the world is opening up. Both Microsoft and Hugging Face have announced that they will be supporting plugins. It sure would be nice to have a standard plugin interface rather than have to write, different plugins for every language model you wanted to be able to be useful for.
Good point. Yeah. I think also anyone that built plugins so far knows the pain of, like, having to update your manifest or your schema and that whole, like, rigmarole process. It actually, so I was using OAuth, or I use OAuth in mine, and I just eventually had to take complete control. So I send ChatGPT to my own custom like OAuth proxy that then I handle OAuth with Google, because it wasn't sending all of the right data. And then like in order to like get it to work, you have to send over the code, and then the code has to like be updated and blah blah blah. And I was just like, this is like early stuff for ChatGPT or OpenAI, and you can feel it's not standardized yet. And so, yeah, that is a good point. As Hugging Face, as Microsoft, ChatGPT, how are we going to standardize the plugin process? Any thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, I'm not that optimistic about having a standard because
Okay.
first of all, these are still competitors, and even if you look at other things like Android versus iOS, right? There's you still have to develop every app 2 times after
Yep.
like 20 years. So I'm not optimistic. It may happen, may not.
Yeah. Question, Ben, with yours, do you find that, so your K through 12, are they on ChatGPT already? Like I have no idea what's going on in K through 12 right now at all.
Mm,
And so are
no,
they on ChatGPT?
no. So well, the
No.
teachers are and
Okay.
the middle schoolers are. It's because their official age limit is like 13, I think.
Yep.
So not the young kids. So for the elementary school, definitely they're not on ChatGPT today.
Mhm.
So the main user there would be parents, educators, you
Got it.
know,
Got it.
and hopefully maybe in the future they would have a education friendly
Version.
version of
Yep.
ChatGPT that's strongly moderated, that's safe for school. But I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry. Random thought that I was just like, man, are kids now in kindergarten on ChatGPT right now? And so, anyways, just had to ask. All right. Like the world is changing so quickly. Hans came in. How do we speed? And I think, Ben, you really addressed this problem in your challenges section. So if you could kind of look at this one, how do we speed up the plugin model? I love the workflows, but when I show user my app, I find myself having to talk over the delays. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that definitely is a problem. So I was saying the key problem is really about ChatGPT trying to generate the things it sends to plugin, right? So that because once it calls the plugin, it start to type out things, and then people start to see it is actually doing something. But before that, it's staying in the spinning button all the time while it is trying to compose the query to to our plugin, right? That's the problem. So anything we can do there, right, to reduce that would be helpful. For example, cutting off the API into multiple calls, for example, right? Doesn't make it do one call, one huge API call to get everything. Maybe have it call once, right? Get some info back and decide whether it needs to do another call, right? Because the
Yep.
call itself, it doesn't really take a lot of time. But so anything that we can do to make sure it doesn't write something in its API call unnecessarily, right, would definitely help speed it up. And the other thing is avoid duplication. For my example, sometimes ChatGPT would write down the pseudocode and then it try to call my API. There, it will write down the same pseudocode again, right? So that definitely doubles the time. So I try very hard to make sure it doesn't do it. So it will just compose the pseudocode in one shot and then send it over. So those are some of the things that helped me.
Very cool. Bruce, any thoughts on this one? Anything that you had to run into with your
A couple.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
Cool.
an awful lot of stuff going on in ChatGPT. If you open up a developer tool in your browser, I'm sure we've all noticed it takes a long time before ChatGPT actually calls the plugin. And moderation is deep in the middle of all of that. there's a call to the GPT moderation engine to moderate the text that ChatGPT is sending to your plugin. There's a call to moderation to check what your plugin is trying to send back to ChatGPT. There's another call to, I think it's DaVinci 2, to come up with a title that it puts on the left-hand side of the chat window for that interaction. I mean, there's all this stuff going back and forth, and it all takes a long time. I don't know that we can do anything about it until ChatGPT makes that whole process more efficient.
Yep. I think to kind of just add on to what everyone is saying is like, we are at the beginning of this, so expect it to be slow, right? Right now, it's about kind of discovering what is possible. And with time, hopefully, I mean, we saw it go from 3 to 3.5 to 3.5 turbo. And now at 3.5 turbo, compared to even when it was just 3, that was, for me at least, a few months, right? And of course, like there was a lot of building that happened for them way before that. But we do. And a lot of this, we're at the beginning of using this, and we just kind of have to evolve with it. It's going to be slow in the beginning. And that's just part of it, is kind of accepting that for the trade-off of having this new amazing tool. And yeah, so just, I know you know this, but just be patient. It's going to get better. It's going to get better and better and better and faster. Probably to a point that you're going to say slow down eventually. Like, it's going too fast. I can't, like, it's doing too much. Which is a whole nother topic of like, what is the impact here? But that's not the point of this conversation. Awesome. All right. We are at the end here. I encourage everyone, go check out the chats. Sometimes we had it open, but when we didn't have it open, there was still people talking and sharing, and people thanking Ben, you and Bruce for showing up and talking and sharing. So just want to say, like, let's keep connecting. We're over in the forum. We're talking. I think there is a great subreddit that was started for AI prompt engineering, which we also published on. But I think a lot of this, like, we have to understand we are at the beginning, and so we can help define that. And so that takes us talking and getting together and sharing, even if it's on a Friday at, like, I don't know, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Next week is going to be in London, 7:30 p.m. in London. I think it's BST. And so British summer time is what they call it. And so check it out. We'll be there. If you see this and you're like, I wish I was on screen, send me a DM, come join us. Like, let's be a part of it. I just want to, we have other questions and we'll address them next time. These questions are going to keep coming. And so don't worry. If you ask a question in Twitter, we'll get to it. If you want your question asked quicker, join us in the live and we'll answer it as it's coming in, just because they're here. I think that wraps it up. And Bruce, anything you want to say, any kind of wrapping words? We'll start with you, Bruce. Anything you'd like to share with the audience, thoughts, anything about what's going on?
Not that I can think of. Just getting more fun every day.
It is. Yeah. Ben, anything on your side you want to wrap up with?
Well, just good luck to everyone who is developing some plugin. It's a lot of fun, definitely, because you're working with something that's really smart. But it's also a lot of challenges.
Absolutely. I will end this by saying, did anybody else notice this when you first heard about this and you went to the documentation and you said, I want to figure out how to start using this, that you realized how, I don't want to put names out here, but compared to other large companies that have documentation, you read OpenAI's and you're like, I immediately know how to do this. Like, being able to integrate in with OpenAI's APIs is the simplest integration I've had with such a complex tool that they make very simple for you. So anyone that's worried or concerned or hesitant or whatnot, first just go ask ChatGPT and it'll tell you how to do it. As long as you feed it the documentation, because it's 2021. But just go try. It is the simplest integration I've ever had with an external API, and I And if you can't figure it out, ask ChatGPT. If you can't figure it out there, come ask Bruce, come ask Ben, come ask myself. Go into the forums. We're all there to help you. All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. Ben, Bruce, thanks for joining me on this Friday. Thanks, everybody who showed up. This was fun. It was good.
Yep. Thank
Gonna have
you.
it next week. Bye, everybody. See y'all later.